Hi, I'm Tiffany. This is The Balanced Life, Redefine Success, Redefine Fail. And today I'm continuing with part 2 of how to prepare for better times. As I said on the previous video, this is about if you're trying to grow professionally or try to put yourself into a better financial situation, whether you're going to do it through gardening to help with food costs, whether you're going to go to schooling to learn a new skill or trade, whether you are trying to grow as an entrepreneur, a business person, whatever. This is taking you step by step through the process of how to find out what you need to do, what you need to learn, how you need to grow as a person. And this is where we're going to move into deeper learning. So on the previous video, I started to outline a system if you're trying to learn and prepare for better times. If you missed it, go back and rewatch it. It was about 13 minutes long. It's a little bit longer than I've been trying to make the videos, but there's a lot of information and I would love to have comments. We can start some dialogue on more specific things there and then in future videos based on what people, the questions people have. But we're going to focus on going a little bit deeper here. So you've been looking into skills and the knowledge you need and the cost. And you're likely finding some gaps now in your knowledge. Like I said, one thing that I thought about is I want to be able to do a basic inspection on a house, not for legal purposes, but for my own due diligence, so that I know whether a house has the actual most basic things that I would be okay with. So then I can hire somebody to come in and do a more in-depth inspection. I can't afford to pay somebody an inspector. Let's say an inspection is $200. I'm not going to pay somebody $200 on every single house I'm looking at, because I may look at 100 to end up buying one. So I start with a basic thing to look through, and then I narrow it down to a certain percentage of houses I actually want to go and see, whether it's a drive-by or an actual open house. And then from there, I want to be able to really look inside and do some in-depth looking on about 10% of those. And then a few of those will result in having an inspection and then finally an offer and then maybe a purchase. Same thing with you. You need to know what process you need and what skills you need. Yours isn't necessarily going to be home inspection. It's going to be something else, whether it's investigating schools, financial aid, specific trainings, trying to find mentorship, trying to find networking groups, whatever it is. So start to look into trusted resources. I touched on this a little bit yesterday, talking about how there is bias in everything, and that is fine. We all have a bias. We all have a preference. That's also a bias. We have a preference towards certain things, interest in certain things, belief in certain ways of doing things, and that comes out in the way we discuss what we're doing. And that happens with journalists too. They'll tell you it's not, but I'm sorry, it is. I can show you in almost any article where the bias is just by skimming the first few lines. And I'm not even kidding. Having been a professional writer long enough, I can spot it right away. So you want to look at trusted resources, see who they cite or use. Like what I am a big fan of Heresy Financial and the Economic Ninja. I love Rick Renner for Bible studies, as well as Leon Fontaine. I also like Robert Morris out of Texas, who has a very large church with multiple sites. So if somebody's talking to me about something in the Bible, I'll probably look at one of those three, or my pastor, something they've said. That is my bias, as opposed to maybe somebody else that I might listen to every once in a while, but they don't have a huge influence on me. You might have a professional bias. Let's say that you have a certain philosophy in investing or economics or things like that. That will be your bias. So what I'm trying to say is bias is not bad. It's just a filter, and you need to recognize it. So going and looking at who the people you trust the most are reading, watching, learning from, so that you can learn from the original source, not just their synopsis that they gave you, but also you've got to avoid confirmation bias. That's the bad kind of bias, where you only read things that reinforce what you already think. In business, this is a big problem, because if you focus on only those areas that you agree with in business, you can miss things. If you're listening to the echo chamber, this is the problem with the mainstream media. I'm sorry, they have a very liberal bias. No, I'm not sorry. I mean, it is reality, but I'm sorry that that is a truth. Because they miss things that could help the people who are watching them if they would step outside of their own bias and look at people with differing views as actual intelligent people and not the Antichrist, because then they could understand where a person's coming from and maybe learn something. And I'm saying that on both directions. I listen to people that I disagree with to see where they're missing something so I can take advantage of that. Wow, that's a little bit off topic, but it still works with business. Because in economics, you have different economic philosophies, for example. And if you only listen to one economic philosophy, you may miss something that's happening in the economy that is going to cause you to miss out on opportunities. And that's why, although I am a conservative person and I am a fiscal conservative and things like that, I do listen to the mainstream press and what they're saying, and I read articles every single day from people who disagree with me politically, because I want to hear where they're coming from so that I can adjust. You know, I think it was Lincoln. They said, maybe you'll know, put it in the comments if you know. Keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. Well, they're not my enemies, but they're somebody who sees things differently than I do. And I want to know where they're coming from so that I can be more well-rounded in my business development. I may listen to somebody who's a flipper, even though I never, ever, ever want to flip a property, but I'll listen to a flipper because they'll recognize something about a property for a short term that I wouldn't otherwise. Likewise, I like to listen to people, like in the community where I live. A lot of these people have lived within a 3-mile radius of the place they were actually physically born, and they're in their 80s or older. Gobs of people, dozens, hundreds. Well, I like hearing from them because the way they take care of their house is very different than somebody who moves every 3 years. I've lived in the same house now for just over 22 years. I have not moved since, was I 24 or something like that? So basically my entire adult life, almost my entire married life has been spent in the same exact place. And I view the maintenance of my house very differently than somebody who moves every few years, or even who's just moving into a house and they're going to be here for a little bit and they're not sure, they may move later. They're not. This is where all my kids have grown up, where they've come home to when they were born, except for the oldest, all that kind of stuff. So look at people who see things differently. Explain more steps and join networking groups. So explain to yourself in your notebook more steps as you go deeper. You may even want to write this on note cards. Do you remember some of you who did the term papers, who might be in like your 40s, how we would write the citations on a little note card, and then we would create an outline and we'd put it in the margin and we'd rearrange the note cards and those things. So you may want to be able to insert steps, which is why I said on the previous video, it's better to type it up. Insert steps as you learn new things. And if there's something you realize you don't know, just type a sentence. Need to learn more about X, and then highlight it so that you know to go back. So look into networking groups. BNI is a community kind of network group. There's Christian network groups. There's EMS network groups. There's teacher network groups. There's insurance salespeople network groups. There's all kinds of groups. Find a group that has people within your industry, and find groups that has people outside of your industry. So again, you can hear what people within your industry are doing to make them successful, but then learn from other industries and bring it in. Some of the greatest innovators are those people who have taken something that exists and tweaked it just a touch and brought some innovation into their own industry from something they saw on the outside. If you have some good examples, there's all kinds of examples that I've heard, but if you have a good example, share it in the comments below, especially if you can give me specific names, that'd be super great. But if you don't know, just share it. I can remember when I was in early college, us talking a little bit about that in one of my classes, about how people, when they try to make something big and different, like I've discussed in a video last month about satellite TV, couldn't figure out what satellite TV was in the late 80s, early 90s. The concept didn't make any sense to us. That on-demand movies, well, how does that work? Over time, as the internet grew, we could understand the idea of on demand. And so then the idea of the satellites and things like that, it all changed. So, number 3, simulations. I said this in the previous video. Run simulations in your own head. If you're becoming an electrician, practice wiring things. How would you wire something in this situation? I know in EMS, they'll do mock disasters where they pretend like there was some kind of mass casualty incident, a train wreck, a car crash with multiple vehicles, maybe some kind of like tornado or something like that. I mean, just bad stuff. And they would run simulations. What would we do? What do we have here? What do we have here? My husband was a fireman. That's how I know a lot of these things about EMS. And that's why I use those examples. But I'd love to hear examples from other industries. Put them below. But running simulations, you don't need to be dramatic. Just things where you can kind of practice in your mind how you would do different things. Teachers do this, thinking through different kinds of learners. So if you're like saying creating courses for online teaching for adults, what are different kinds of learners? The visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic learners, maybe people who have been doing it a long time or complete novices. How would you approach the topic and the subject matter differently, and how would you explain it differently? All these things are simulations. If you're a public speaker, knowing how you'll work with somebody who might be disruptive or somebody who's not disruptive but has questions you haven't thought about before. How would you handle that? Number 4, practice tasks. So doing due diligence, taking a blood pressure assessment. They have in hospitals where students have fake patients who they're actors, they're pretending to be patients. Of course, the students know. But they're pretending to be patients and they're practicing assessment, trying to figure out what is wrong with this person. And they practice doing blood pressures and different things like this. So we do it in healthcare. We do it in public safety. How would we do it in content creation? Think about that. And number 5, don't procrastinate. Try to spend time daily on the area of learning and practicing. Each day, as you watch these videos, take 10-15 minutes after the video ends and try to apply some of the things. Maybe go back. I have down below the timestamp so that you can go back to the specific part of the video that has the information that you might need to review or that you want to think about. Go back and think through how you would do each thing. Think through how you would teach it, how you would explain it. Because if you can take the information and explain it to someone, you have it mastered. So always, that's why a lot of times I'll talk to you about teaching it and summarizing it and things like that. That allows you to make the material your own, and you can really begin to work with it and not just follow somebody's example. All right. Imagine how in your mind how it will work, and then how much time you think it would take to get there. You know, if you're going to make a sales call, do you have a script? How long will the call take? What's the tone you need to have? Who's your target person that you're going to call? All these kind of things. There's so many different scenarios based on what you're going to do. So that's why it's so important that you take the time to get really specific about what you need to do and how to get there. Because there are some similarities between somebody starting a photography business, a writing business, and an insurance business, but there's also some pretty important differences. And so knowing to your specific goals, industries, life skills, experiences, things, knowing what you need to do to get ready and to recognize when opportunity knocks, real opportunity, not what a salesman tells you is opportunity, that will be the key to your success. You want to be able to recognize it as a professional and not have somebody swindle you by convincing you that their timing is really the right timing. Okay, so I hope you got something out of this. I know I kind of went down some rabbit trails today, but this is such a huge topic, even though I'm breaking it down the way I am. Please share your comments below. Please let me know what you're trying to learn about and some of the things that you've learned, resources you found, and share them with our community. And I will see you on the next video. Bye.